Three. Hello, everybody. My name is John DePippa. I'm here with Judge Wendell Griffen, and this is the first of what we hope will be a continuing series of broadcasts that we've entitled Rational Basis, in which we explore current issues, particularly issues relating to law and government. And so today we wanted to jump on for this first one because of what's happening in Venezuela. So Judge Griffen, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we can do this together. We'll post this to our YouTube channel and to other social media so people can have access to it. And maybe someday we'll figure out how to go live. So, as you know, Donald Trump today essentially took over Venezuela, sent the military in to arrest and remove Nicolas Maduro and his wife basically on charges of drug trafficking. Maduro had been indicted in 2020. There's been a superseding indictment recently. And initially, the Trump administration wanted to portray this as a law enforcement operation. But in my opinion, this is essentially a military operation in an offensive capacity, taking over another country, which I believe requires constitutional approval or congressional approval, or at least report to Congress and post congressional approval under the War Powers Act. So it's just another example of Donald Trump essentially ignoring the law and ignoring the Constitution. Judge Griffen, what's your take on this?
I couldn't agree with you more strongly. I think that you've couched it quite well, Dean DePippa. First of all, let's remember something for the population that's viewing this video. The Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land, not the presidential edicts of any president.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, the Constitution of the United States provides that the power to declare war vests in the Congress of the United States. It's
Right.
Article 1. The war powers is an Article 1 power. And the president has no power. No president has the power under our form of government to unilaterally declare war any time against any place.
That's right.
Thirdly, let's remember that before the president can declare war, before war can be declared, the president has to go to Congress and make the case. And there has to be a joint action of Congress to vest the president with the authority to declare war. Anything other than that is unconstitutional.
That's right.
None of that has happened.
That's
There
right.
has been no presentation by the President of the United States to any branch of Congress, let alone the full Congress, of any grounds to invade. And let's be clear, Donald Trump, President of the United States, invaded a sovereign nation,
Yeah.
Venezuela.
Yeah. So
He
go ahead.
and then he took the president, the leader of that country, hostage.
Yeah.
The United States military did not arrest the president of Venezuela. They claimed him, took him hostage, and Donald Trump, in his press conference, said, "We're running Venezuela now."
Yeah. So what's interesting is over time, presidents have asserted some unilateral power to use the military. And essentially, it's always sort of boiled down to a couple things. One, the president felt like he had to take action to protect American property or to protect American interest or protect American citizens. What's interesting is that none of those apply in this situation. Although, and this is another example, in my opinion, of how the Trump administration uses law cynically, right? They tried to portray this as, well, we're just arresting a guy who's under indictment. This is a law enforcement operation. Marco Rubio said that in the press conference. He said, I want to make it clear here, this is a law enforcement operation, pretending that it's coming under that. And then Donald Trump went on in his press conference talking about how Venezuelan drugs have killed thousands of Americans. and that there are gang members here, portraying this as we're protecting American lives. Of course, all of that is exaggerated, and none of that really matters because it was nakedly clear in the press conference that this was about oil. That Trump repeatedly said, we're going to run the country, we're going to take over the oil field, we're going to produce a lot of money, we're going to sell it to the rest of the world. This is just a hostile takeover of another business, at least as I think Trump sees it.
I agree. The Guardian newspaper had a line on this that I thought was very appropriate. It is the Putinization of U.S.
Yes,
foreign policy.
that's right.
The United States now in Venezuela has taken as to Venezuela the same kind of conduct that we decry Vladimir Putin engaging in
Mhm.
against Ukraine. We decried the Germans taking a similar action against Poland almost a century ago.
Mm-hmm.
And now, 3 days into a new year, the President of the United States has engaged in, well, it's a
Yeah,
gangster move.
that's right.
It's a
So
gangster.
what
It reminds me of what happens in street gangs. Okay, this
that's
is
right.
your turf. I'm going to blow up you and take over this corner.
Yeah. I think that's a really good analogy because in the press conference, Trump essentially said, I'm going to reenact the Monroe Doctrine, call it my doctrine, which means that I'm in control of the Western Hemisphere. But that also means, as you said, that there are rival gangs, rival nations who are now being told, look, if you're the major power in your region, you're in control. And that was the justification Russia wants to use for taking over Ukraine. It's essentially what China is asserting in its region. What this does in terms of foreign policy, and not just law, is that it gives permission to those states to act, as you said, the same way, to act as a gang and control their turf.
Neocolonialism is another thing that comes to mind
Yeah,
because what happens is Venezuela is a de facto now colony for purposes of its
right.
natural principal resource, oil, of U.S. foreign policy.
Mm-hmm.
The Donald Trump said in his press conference, uh, she's going to do whatever we say.
Yeah, that's right. Yep,
So
that's
the
right.
people of Venezuela cannot look at their former vice president, presumably now their president, now that Donald Trump has removed their president, and say, we can trust you to act in our interests
Yeah,
because Donald Trump has told the world that you have no power save whatever power he gives
that's right.
you or lets you exercise.
That's right. And you know, because you're right. In that press conference, he said, "We're going to run it until we're sure it's being run correctly." Right. So, I mean, if I were the opposition in Venezuela, I would hear that as saying, "You're going to do what you're told until we're sure that we've extracted everything we can." The neo-colonialist mindset. Um, you know, a year ago, I started saying to people, Donald Trump isn't just going to play dictator, he wants to be one. And he's going to build his dictatorship around plausible but cynical invocations of presidential power. And he did that with tariffs. He's tried to do it with deploying troops. He's done it in some other areas, especially with pardons. This is just another cynical deployment of presidential power in which he will become the dictator. That's all it is.
It's that, and I think we need to use the political term for it because we have been avoiding that term. We need to use the F word.
Mhm.
This is fascism on a global stage.
That's right.
This is no longer fascism in a domestic context where the leadership of Donald Trump is running over the interior United States. Now, Donald Trump
Yeah,
is acting as a fascist ruler against other nations. And
that's
as
right.
you pointed out, He's acting just the same way that China does in
Mhm.
its region. He's acting the same way that Russia does in its region. And he's basically saying to NATO and to Europe, uh, we're not going to pay attention to what happens in NATO and Europe. You're on your own.
Mhm.
Notwithstanding that we've got this almost century alliance that we signed on to after World War II, we're going to walk away from that because we're basically a
Yeah.
superpower unto ourselves. It's an eerie situation. I'll add one other thing. As you know, I served in the military, and I can't help but wonder about the soldiers, the sailors, the Marines, the air personnel who are flying these missions, whether or not any of their leaders wondered, where is the lawful authority
Yeah.
for my conduct when my commander in chief has said, we're running Venezuela?
Hmm. That's right. They have, I mean, for anyone with good conscience would have to think that. I'm glad you brought up fascism because one of the key components of fascism was essentially running the country on behalf of large industrial interests and not really nationalizing the businesses themselves, but aligning national interest with the business interest and then deploying overwhelming force to do that. I mean, that was Nazism in a nutshell. And so that's what I was thinking when they were saying we're going to take over Venezuela, run it, and extract their oil. It's colonialism, but it's also the key feature of fascism.
Yes.
Taking business interests and then making them identical with our national interests and deploying national power to make it work.
And at some point, we have got to ask ourselves, where is the we the people part
That's
of
right.
this? I mean, the Constitution of the United States begins with those powerful three
Mhm.
words, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish domestic tranquility, promote the common defense, provide for the general welfare. We the people haven't acted.
That's right. Well, yeah, one of my former students who lives in Georgia now, who's a really, really perceptive person on political and legal matters, posted something and said, saying something is illegal doesn't stop it unless the people in power care about the law. The only thing that stops it is voting for the right people. And I mean, it sounds Pollyannish, but that's really the only option we've got, especially because Trump has immunity from criminal prosecution. And so the only alternative is not to try to command the waves to stop, but to say that, but also mobilize opposition and vote for people who will care about the law and care about not just the law in its sort of cynical name, but the law in its reality, and use that as their moral basis.
And I should add that this is not a partisan perspective.
That's right.
This is not Democrat versus Republican. This is not liberal versus conservative. This is little d democracy.
That's right.
This is democracy at the basic civics level.
Hmm.
If representational government means anything, it means that we allow the processes of government and the powers of government to
Yeah.
be exercised according to the agreed norms we have agreed to as a
Hmm.
government. And this action against Venezuela violates every norm that we have, whether it's
Right.
the Constitution, whether it's our system of international law, it violates the UN Charter. It violates everything we've signed on to as a people. And I don't know how we as a nation can basically say to any other nation now, you can't do this.
Yeah.
You can't do this because it violates their sovereignty, because we've now violated the sovereignty of another nation.
We don't have any credibility there. And I'm glad you mentioned process in that, because it seems to me that the essential MAGA morality is that the end justifies the means. And that means process doesn't matter, right? Due process doesn't matter. Following international norms doesn't matter. Consulting with Congress doesn't matter. Only what matters is the outcome, right? If we get the bad guys and their oil, that's good for us. That's all that matters. And it is such a barren, empty, ugly morality that's not just dangerous legally, it's dangerous to the country's soul.
Yes.
Corrodes who we think we are and exposes who we really are. And that's really dangerous.
We have just now made the term ugly American real again.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it will stick. A month ago, Donald Trump was bemoaning the fact that nobody was nominating him for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
Since then, he's bombed Nigeria.
Yeah.
He's threatened Iran. He's now invaded Venezuela. He has murdered over 100 people on international waters, and he has not produced
Right.
a shred of evidence against any of them that anything they were doing was threatening the lives, the property, or the interests of the United States. Just because he says it doesn't make it so.
That's right. And I think there's some spillover effects domestically. Internationally, there are going to be a lot. If I were Colombia, I'd be very concerned. If I'm Cuba,
Yes.
I'm very concerned.
Yes.
But I think domestically, this opens up the use of the Alien Enemies Act, because I was paying attention to his language, and he was talking about invasion and sending all this dangerous stuff and people to the United States. All the language that the Alien Enemies Act uses to justify incarcerating people without trial and without notice and without due process, any of that. So I expect to see that ramping up. I think there's going to be a spillover in the sense that he now may feel emboldened to use the Insurrection Act if there's any opposition to this, because after all, he's a wartime president now. And we'll see further deployment of troops around the country. So I think domestically, there's going to be some spillover. And if you listen to the language, he's not a smart man in any sort of intellectual sense, but he's smart in that if he's told to say something, that it's good if you say it, he'll say it. And so you're going to hear all the invasion talk. You're going to hear all the stuff about sending criminals here. You're going to hear all this stuff because they told him you need to say that in order to send troops to cities and lock people up.
I agree with everything you said. I want to add one other thing
Sure.
to domestic front. All of those things you mentioned, the Insurrection Act, the alien issue, leads to another possibility. And I think we're not fear mongering here. We're just simply extrapolating
That's right.
inferences. And another plausible inference that must be raised is, how does this affect the midterm elections?
Mm-hmm.
Will Donald Trump use public outcry and opposition to what he has done as a pretext for either canceling or trying to cancel or trying to intimidate voting or suppress voting in the midterm elections, which by all of the projections I have seen project that the current administration and its party is cruising, as we say, for a bruising.
Yeah.
But if you got the wartime powers, if you got wartime president, you said we're being invaded, you're shutting down domestic norms. The most powerful thing you can shut down is voting.
Yeah.
And elections.
I have been resisting that idea for over a year because people were saying that last year, and I was saying, well, I'm not so sure. I don't think so. There are enough guardrails. Um, the truth is, I'm not so sure anymore that any of that is going to prevent it. Now, I think there's one thing is definitely going to happen. And I truly believe that Trump and his allies will try to intimidate voters. They'll
Yes.
try to make it as difficult as possible as voters. So they may deploy troops to protect the voting places, but you know who that deters from voting, right?
Yes.
And they may only deploy troops to certain precincts where they know that their effect will be magnified. So I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. Whether or not they would actually try to delay the elections, maybe part of me is still so naive that I can't believe even this current Republican Party would go along with it. But now I'm not so sure.
I would never call you naive. Never. Uh, I do think that we are forced now to recalculate our worst notions of what we might expect from this administration.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody said to me, there's no bottom to this. Just when you thought you'd seen the bottom, there
Yeah.
goes another level to the hell we're seeing, and there's no bottom. I think that what you made the point earlier, what is very clear, the one thing that this administration respects and the one currency that it lives by is power.
Mm-hmm.
Raw, naked, brute power,
That's right.
waged basically in the interest of the personal and the commercial, the financial interest of a discrete number of
Mm-hmm.
oligarchs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't like using the term, but we are now mirroring the oligarchy of Russia.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I think you're right. I like the way you described it as recalibrating or recalculating what we think the worst can be. Um, and we haven't seen the worst.
No.
And so, like I said, I'm coming to believe that we ought to, at the very least, anticipate some monkey business with the elections, because I just don't know anymore. Because you can't believe it. We don't have a lot of time left on this, but what I wanted to do for just a couple of minutes is talk about the problem with the media,
Mm,
because getting information to people is essential in a democracy. It's essential
yes.
so we can make informed choices.
Yes.
And we can't make informed choices if that information is being skewed. And so, what I did this morning, I was watching the different news stations. CBS got the scoop on this. They were ahead of everybody else, right? And then Fox got an exclusive Trump phone interview. No one else got either of those things. And so we've created these sort of two state media companies who have special access so they can become stenographers for the administration. And then I started listening, and Fox began interviewing Republicans almost immediately, supporting Trump, including Richard Nixon's grandson.
Mm,
And then CNN essentially tried to talk about the mechanics. They didn't want to say anything controversial, but they talked all about, oh, how many troops and what it looked like and what's going to happen with the CIA. And then MSNBC or MS Now had some mild critique, a little bit of critique. Um, but if even MS Now is toning down its critique, we really don't have a very fulsome media environment.
the fourth estate has been neutered. If not neutered, it has certainly been muted.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's not good for democracy. It's not good for the First Amendment. And I guess I will ask this question: who are the media now
Hmm.
that the public will either go to or be, because we now are, you and I are representatives of a media.
That's right.
We're on a medium getting out a message, talking about an issue of global importance. But God help us, we know that our voices are insignificant almost compared to the means of Larry Ellison
That's right.
and his son, who runs now CBS and who is going to be able to, who's going to make a play for CNN as soon as he can.
Right.
And so we have to ask ourselves, if Jeff Bezos has the Washington Post, this means that we really don't have the access, the media. We don't have the Pentagon Papers kind of media.
No. And sadly, we don't have a public that has habituated itself for that kind of information.
Yeah,
I mean, so the mainstream media circulation is way down. I
yeah,
mean, even in Arkansas,
right,
the so-called statewide newspaper has what, a fraction, perhaps 20% of its former circulation.
right.
And even those people are probably newspaper readers who tend to skew left anyway. And there are so many people in the country who don't consume media. That's the first problem. But then there are a lot of people who really want media that confirms their biases, and that's
Yes.
what they're used to. And they don't have the critical thinking skills to understand when they're being manipulated and when they're not. Um, I'm really pessimistic about that, but I do think that people like us and others can do what we can. We can keep banging our drum, the drum we know, right? We
Yeah.
can keep sort of getting information out. And in this environment, that's the best we can do, and encourage other people to do the same.
The most we can ever do is the best we can.
That's
The
right.
most we can ever do is the best we can. And I quite agree with you. We're going to do our best. We're going to be that voice. And I'm
Yeah,
so glad to be on this medium with you, on what I hope will be not just the first, but the first of
any,
many
I agree.
opportunities for us to talk about issues of national import, because democracy does matter and we can make a difference.
Yes. Well, I'm honored to do this with you, and I don't want it to be our last. And so, as we get better with the technology, we're going to do more and more of these. Um, and things move so quickly that there may be times like today where at 4 in the morning, you and I are texting to each other saying, hey, let's do something today because it's really important. Um, Not that I recommend being up at 4 in the morning every day, but it happens.
I am glad you said that, because there are people in my network who say, why are you up at 4 in the morning? And now I can say, because I have another good friend who's up at 4 o'clock in the morning, because these things matter.
That's right. I'm up at 4 in the morning saying, oh my God, we've invaded Venezuela. And then you pop up on my text saying, hey, we invaded Venezuela. So, Judge, this was great. This is going to be called Rational Basis for all
Yeah.
you folks out there. We're going to try to bring our perspective. We have our biases, but that's okay. Everyone does, and we think we've got perspectives worth sharing on issues about law and politics and government. So this was the first one. We hope the first of many. Thanks for being here, Judge Griffin. Thanks for doing this with me.
Dean DePippa, thanks for agreeing to do it. It's a joy.
We will see you next time.
Yes,
Bye.
sir.